Willow. Season 7, Chapter 1, The One Trick. Too many deviled eggs. To most, that concept would either sow confusion or conjure heresy. What, in the realm of appetizers and canapes, are more a staple than the humble deviled egg? Simple to make, yet tricky to master, deviled eggs walk the line between working-class food and high society amuse-gueule. Quickly put together with a simple slice of olive on top, and it's the sort of food found in any household. Drop a dollop of roe and a sprig of fresh chive instead, and suddenly you have a little cocktail fit for celebrities. Silky smooth or chunky egg filling is a matter of preference, and the inclusion of chopped anchovies or onions is completely optional. Versatile and delicious, they're the perfect nibble to get a party started. Be that as it may, 3 dozen deviled eggs for 5 or 6 guests might be considered a little much. Even more tragic is how they were my last eggs, meaning that the pastiche de nata that I had planned would need to be replaced by something else. Looking at my 3 laden serving plates, brimming with delicious deviled eggs, I regret how one cannot uncook an egg. "I told you it was too many," Eric chimes in from behind me. He reaches over my shoulder, reducing my inventory to 35, barely denting the total. Normally, I'd have a fit over him picking at food before guests are set to arrive, but I'd be hard-pressed to set blame upon his shoulders. After all, someone will have to eat all these eggs. "You did no such thing," I protest, pulling the refrigerator door open so I can store my plentiful canapes. I've been slaving in the kitchen most of the afternoon in anticipation of this evening. No expense was spared in preparation. Jamaican patties wait to be baked, and a board of rolled-up prosciutto and Genoa salami, accompanied by pieces of sharp cheddar and brie, sits covered on the kitchen counter. Soon, the Willow will close its doors for the evening, and only a selected few esteemed guests will be allowed to cross the threshold. Bottles of gin, whiskey, vodka, tequila, rum, along with bitters and a homemade simple syrup have been set aside in case they need be called upon. "I absolutely did," Eric counters, carrying 2 dishes of eggs to the refrigerator. "The moment you took out that massive cauldron of yours and started chucking eggs into it." I could have sworn he said no such thing, but Eric isn't a particularly talented liar. If he was trying to fib to either make himself seem wiser or me dumber, it was a better job than I expected of him. "Wouldn't it be hilarious," he continued, bringing the 3rd dish, "if she didn't come after all?" The prospect of being stuck with so much food barely registered. Most of it could be repurposed and added to the Willow's menu for tomorrow. What I couldn't, like the eggs, I could send home with Eric. I'd sleep soundly knowing they would be consumed to the last bite within a day. Rather, it's the proposed absence of our guest of honor that sinks my mood. After months away, it was unthinkable that she wouldn't make the Willow one of her very first stops. "If she doesn't show up, you have my permission to hunt her down and bring her in, dead or alive." Dutifully, Eric started scrubbing away at some of the pots and pans waiting to be washed and used again. This was a new thing for my brother. Either something he learned from his ex, or the first hints of belated maturity. Either way, seeing him offer help without being asked was a refreshing development. One I would not be questioning. "Isn't that a little drastic? The dead part, I mean." I scoffed, flipping through my cookbook to hunt down a recipe for Italian meringue. "Someone's got to eat all those eggs." I could see in his eyes that he was about to say something pedantic, probably a snide comment about how the dead don't eat deviled eggs, when our sibling antics were cut short by an unexpected gust of air. It carried a lot with it, that hint of wind. It was the kind of late winter breath that, while still cool, seemed to masquerade as spring. It was the subtle promise of summer, touched with but a kiss of the smell of refuse. I think a volunteer just stepped forth, Eric mocked, crouching on the balls of his feet. The raccoons, of course. The wind is an omen of their arrival. If Eric's new habit was to be helpful, this was the raccoons. Just when the egg willow is about to close its doors, they pick the lock and saunter inside, begging for scraps. Never the full brood, but usually 2 or 3 at a time. Without my intervention, a scene will soon unfold. Eric, deluded into thinking he's some sort of wildlife expert, will extend his hand and snap his fingers to attract one of the animals. He'll find a candidate who'll take the bait, expecting a snack. Once the raccoon discovers the trick and his hands, that's when consequences will depend on which of the critters he's angered. If he's lucky, it'll be little Brioche, who will crawl away disappointed but otherwise in peace. The big one, we call the Dawn, however, won't take such a slight without retribution. For an animal that lives in trash, he's particular about demanding respect. Should he attract the attention of Crimson, however, then may God have mercy on Eric's soul. But I would not allow things to get that far. Again. All right, Dr. Doolittle. I grab a handful of his shirt collar and pull him back to his feet. I don't have time to spend at the hospital this week. If you want to feed the raccoons, you know the protocol. Sheepish, Eric makes a half-hearted attempt to shake off my hold. I don't understand his fascination with offering his fingers to everything with teeth, but I've no doubt it will cost him a digit or 2 in time. I expect him to repeat my instructions on the matter back to me in a sing-song, sarcastic voice, but Eric never gets the chance. We have a raccoon feeding protocol now? She's early. But then again, when has Annabelle ever shown any respect for scheduling? Oh, what a difference a few months can make. I didn't appreciate before her departure how Annabelle was at a weird place in her life. In a town like Willow, a town steeped in the strange and bizarre, it can be difficult to notice when things take a left turn. At odds with her mother and teetering between continuing her education or setting out to make her own way, Annabelle had become somewhat aimless. Everything around her had grown so large, and the magic of Willow only added to that burden. Between the kitchen and dining room, the change is subtle, but unmistakable once noticed. She changed her hair color again, opting for an angry orange, and there's a new bag on her shoulder, one already festooned with pins and badges. But it's the look in her eyes and the confidence in her spine that speaks to her journey. You have to treat them like royalty now, Eric explains. Either you bring them food at the dumpster, or I don't waste time listening to the rest of the story, nor do I give Annabelle the chance either. She can learn about raccoon protocols later. Before she can protest, I have her in my arms. Ah, she returns the embrace. I missed you too. Holding her at arm's length, I take another fresh look. The way she smiles teases at adventures in need of telling, but also a new kinship, as if she now holds a membership card to a very exclusive club. A clawed paw latched onto my pant leg, lightly scratching at raw skin. The pull on the fabric has but one explanation, and the associated weight tells me who I'm dealing with. Lighter than most, Brioche is carefully affectionate, but rarely climbs on people. I suppose this is a special occasion for everyone. We were going to have a surprise party to celebrate your return, I say, but I guess it won't be that much of a surprise anymore. As long as there's still a party, and the party has food, I'll be more than happy to be the center of attention for it. A mischievous smile creeps up on my lips. Would I ever host an event without food? Brioche settles on my shoulder, digging into my shirt and apron, catching very little skin on the process. Her head on a swivel, she can't decide between begging for scraps and watching Annabelle. I'd be less worried if you lost the ability to talk. She shrugs me off to go offer my brother a hug, calling him roomy. There was a teenage lust in how she interacted with Eric before, overstepping her welcome so she could feel his muscles a few moments longer than necessary. While I wouldn't presume the attraction is completely gone, there's more respect of his space now. She looks around the kitchen, taking in the familiar room, hunting for changes made in her absence. Her nose wrinkles as she tries to guess what I have in store for the evening. Inevitably, her gaze comes to rest on the bottles. A humble collection of alcohols and spirits, but one I'm sure is enough to enliven an evening and spark a proper homecoming. She thumbs through the gin and rum, pauses to read the label on a bottle of wine, all with a familiar, knowing smile. We've come a long way from the Annabelle that served college cocktails out in the woods near Pickering's farm. Pulling a few bottles from the lineup, Annabelle turns back to look at Eric and me, a spark in her eyes like the reflection of Danza lights.
"Want to see a trick?"
she asks. We partied. Well, as much as we do at the Aquilo Cafe. It's no mystery why catering is so appealing to me. There's something satisfying about being part of the very fabric of an event while still standing outside of the actual tapestry of it all. Serving food, replenishing chafing dishes, rearranging serving platters so they remain appealing, all activities that serve as a permeable wall between me and the guests. All the while, I remain a presence, barely visible but undeniable. With roots planted deep in the soil of Aquilo's modest downtown, catering has been the means by which I've managed to spread branches throughout the village. Every wedding, every funeral, every graduation that I cook for is a new opportunity to learn of the citizens of Aquilo. By my second year running the cafe, I'd met damn near everyone and learned all of the relationships floating on the surface of the social pond. This was where Annabelle and I shared kinship. Though her tastes lean towards more lively events, she too has a tendency to inject herself indirectly into the revelry. When I met her, she was bartending the Danza lights, plying dancers with cheap cocktails and fruity drinks, happy to savor the celebration through their mood instead of dancing with them. Since then, the fiery mixologist has only doubled down on her passion for drink. Not a drunk, or sommelier, but something else entirely. She has little interest in the spectacular or the inebriant, but rather it's how cocktails and mixes rub against the social fabric that gets Annabelle going. She's a friend, an assistant, and after the trick she showed us before the party, I suppose she's now somewhat of a colleague.
"Weird, isn't it?"
she asks, looking at me through orange bangs. I scoop out a near-perfect ball of homemade praline ice cream that I drop into a bowl, sprinkling it with crumbled Biscoff, but with a touch of pink salt for flavor. Sliding the bowl across the counter to Jordan, I smile to myself. "You're going to have to narrow that down for me," I say, voicing the source of my amusement.
"Look."
A bottle of spiced rum in one hand, a copper mug sweating frost in the other, she hops over the line that separates the Canadian and U.S. side of the Aquilo.
"Criminal,"
she says from beyond the line before hopping back.
"Legitimate bartender."
"Keep messing around and get my liquor license revoked. See if I ever throw you a party again." Eyes narrowed and smile stretched with mischief, she leans in close and puts the cold mug in front of me.
"You'd forgive me,"
Annabelle declares with amused confidence.
"Maybe."
I bring the mug to my nose to sample its aroma. "But how about we pretend I wouldn't and you behave a little?" "What is this?"
"An orange mule. Nothing fancy, just a little drink I picked up from a tavern in Montreal."
"You'd hate it. All they had were chips and chicken nuggets, but the guy at the bar had himself some artistic flair, you know? Like a graffiti artist with a shaker." I take a sip, and while nothing supernatural, I wouldn't call the drink mundane. It bites back with strong perfumes of ginger, but begs forgiveness immediately with the sweet tang of oranges. The flavor is playful and teasing, distracting the drinker from the boozy rum sneaking in its shadows. It's good, but what really takes me aback isn't the taste, but rather how sophisticated it is. Learned a lot of new tricks while looking for yourself out there? The question pushes Annabelle to break eye contact. Her amused smile doesn't dissipate as much as it transforms. Its texture moves from mischief to contemplation without changing shape, the same way you can tell a sauce has cooled down just by the shine on the surface. She leans forward on her elbows to disappear between the bottles on the counter. Colored lights dance on her skin as they do on the glass, filtering through the liquor as well as her eyes. We didn't do much for the party. I put out the food I prepared, including almost 3 dozen deviled eggs, and Annabelle mixed drinks and told stories. Eric insisted on borrowing some flashing colored lights from Louis's tavern, but I drew the line at a smoke machine. To my surprise, people eventually pushed the tables aside to create a small dance floor, turning the Aquilo into a little private disco. People were having fun, celebrating their friend's return, but mostly just allowing themselves to cut loose a little. Someone even floated the idea of karaoke, to my deepest dread. Jordan sways to some slow electro swing, bowl in one hand, spoon in the other. Eyes closed, he seems to be enjoying a private bliss.
It worries you?
Annabelle asks from behind her bottles.
The magic, I mean. It's a surprise, and unwelcome if I have to be honest about it.
I expect her to be hurt or taken aback by that last confession. Instead, she turns her head to look at me again, reading my features for deeper understanding.
It's just the one trick,
she reassures, swishing some blue curacao in its bottle.
I'm not coming after your empire.
The one trick. She makes it sound like she guessed which card I picked or pulled a coin from behind my ear. Not that there was much more to it than that, at least not on the surface. Without waiting for our reply or even unslinging the bag from her shoulder, Annabelle had mixed something for Eric and me. Something almost banal, but also wicked. I didn't catch all the ingredients, but I saw copious amounts of vodka and a touch of lemon juice. She was careful in how she mixed it, and damn near scientific in her choice of garnishes, a slice of lime and a sprig of thyme. The flavor was mean-spirited. Unlike the mule still cooling the palms of my hands, it was a drink that fought to go down and cared not if I went back for another sip. It wasn't the taste that wove this cocktail spell, but rather the liquor served as a vehicle for intent. It was the plate upon which the magic was served. As soon as Eric finished swallowing, he spoke.
I'm nervous about a job interview on Tuesday.
He looked as surprised speaking the words as I was hearing them. I didn't even know my brother was looking for work yet, let alone that he'd already found a prospect. I'd have asked him for more details if a confession of my own didn't bubble up to the surface uninvited. I'm worried this surprise party's going to be a bust. One trick, but 2 confessions. I couldn't tell in the moment if Annabelle understood what she'd learned to do, or if she had the context to grasp my aversion to such a subjugation of will. While no longer a surprise, the party wasn't a bust, and we got the opportunity to ply Eric with tips and encouragements for his interview. In the end, Annabelle's one trick had no malicious consequences, but I could see the potential. But that was only the first ingredient in a complex recipe of things to worry about.
I don't want you to be reckless, is all,
I say, sipping the mule. The frozen mug feels good on my lips, contrasting with the rising temperature in the dining room. It's tempting to open the back door and let some air in, but there's too much exposed food and I am in no mood to deal with the raccoons. They'll get the leftovers anyway.
Is this the part where I call you out for all the risks you've taken? Or do I reassure you that I'm being careful, tempting fate that I'll slip up at the most inconvenient time?
I welcome the mischief back. I don't need much more pushback than this from Annabelle. She gets it, and that's enough.
I just want you to be careful,
I say.
You're right. I've stirred my share of hornets' nests since I got here. Add a dash of mistakes and a generous sprinkling of ignorance, but it's not just you. There are forces in Aquilo that just plain don't like Dufour witches. I don't know how they'll feel about another dabbler of the mystical arts in town. Just your mom is likely to kill us both if she finds out.
Annabelle stands straight, taking the opportunity to stretch and yawn. The night is still young, but I can only guess at how far she's traveled to make her way home today. Almost absent-minded,
As if her arms had taken on a life of their own, she rinses her shaker and fills it up with ice. With a series of deft movements, agile without wasting effort on needless acrobatics, she pours in an ounce of this and a few drops of that. Like a choreographer letting loose on the dance floor, there's no recipe behind her mix. The drink is an improvised experiment meant to fill silence and time. She drinks directly from the shaker, tasting the concoction, swirling the ice around as she does the thoughts behind her eyes.
Aquilo's getting complicated, she muses, and it all keeps bouncing back here. I don't think Doris meant for you to inherit all of this, but it's a lot, you know?
She pours a portion of her cocktail into a coffee cup taken from under the counter, sliding it to sit next to my copper mug. The idea of more alcohol threatens nausea at the back of my throat, but I have a taste.
I just figure,
she adds while waiting for my judgment,
you need all the help you can get.
The cocktail, just like her offer, means well. The taste is objectively right, with just the right balance of sweet and bitter, using the booze as part of the flavor profile rather than trying to hide it. It's just not what I'm looking for right now. She slipped into the Aquilo unnoticed. Silent and unassuming, she must have floated through the threshold of the cafe at some point during the evening. Hidden by our modest crowd and her own veil of discretion, she haunted the dining room, sampling food and drink while enjoying the atmosphere of revelry in her own particular way. The village is no stranger to the restless, inviting them to manifest in complaint to their unjust ends. They're often easy to placate, the dead. Knowing them is usually the key to their peace, but this spirit is something else entirely. She's more of a presence, an entity with a firm hand on the lever of how much weight she brings to the world of the living. I would have noticed her sooner had she been in the mood to make her arrival known, but she appreciates the value of quiet observance. She's the kind of person to thoroughly read through a recipe, pointless blog and all, before measuring out her ingredients. Helen Edna, notary public, wasn't invited to Annabelle's homecoming, much the same way Olivia Figg wasn't on the list of guests either. No offense to either of them, but who invites their parents to a party? That did nothing to prevent Helen from inviting herself. Whether out of curiosity or simply to chaperone the soirée, she made herself comfortable at the end of the counter where light didn't linger long. It's only between two songs, as I come out of the kitchen with clean glasses, that I notice her. Beige coat neatly folded on her lap, back straight as a bread knife, she watches Eric, Jordan, Haley, Stefan, and all my guests dancing to the scratchy music under struggling lights. Unamused, unbothered, she might as well have been waiting for the bus. "Can I get you anything?" I inquire while unloading my cargo carefully onto the counter next to her. "Coffee would be nice," she answers, her gaze locked on the revelers. "I didn't expect you'd be closed tonight. Would have been a poor surprise party if I'd announced it too loud." I step to the coffee machine, waking the beast from its slumber. For almost anyone, I might have refused, wary of using the hostile contraption in the dark while tipsy. Coffee was meant for later, once the party was showing signs of dissolving in the waters of a later hour. Helen Edna has a knack for many things. Her detached common sense is prized by most business owners in Aquilo, while her depth of knowledge is valued by everyone else. The one thing she's never been accused of, however, is wasting time on whimsy. Helen Edna doesn't come to the Aquilo for coffee in the dead of night. I dodge a boiling sputter from the machine and manage to fill a cup without injury or too much of a scare. A look back at the bottles of liquor makes me wonder what would happen if I slipped an ounce or two of Irish cream into Helen's coffee. Probably nothing good. "Here you go." I set the cup, saucer, and napkin included next to my friend and lean in to watch the other shoe drop. It takes a moment, long enough for me to start worrying that perhaps I'd done something wrong. Thin, precise fingers take the saucer and cup, first blowing on the hot liquid, then taking a tentative sip.
Satisfied, these careful hands reach into her lap, pulling a meticulously folded piece of paper from Helen's coat.
"What are you celebrating, Miriam?"
She shows me the paper, but comes short of handing it over.
"Annabelle's return,"
I explain, eyes following the paper like a dog might a treat or toy. Helen does nothing without purpose, and while she has no flair for the dramatic, it's because she doesn't need it. Her actions have that mystique built in as a factory default. The paper is there for a reason, and she's teasing me for a purpose, but instead of allowing me to sate my curiosity, she uses it to point at my brother and friends.
"They are celebrating Miss Lagasse's return," she turns to explain. "But I've known Dufour since before you were born, Miriam. You tend towards the intimate, private dinners and tete-a-tetes, bespoke cakes and personalized menus. This isn't a homecoming, it's a victory lap."
The paper is finally put within reach of my greedy, expectant fingers, but I fail to reach for it, lingering instead on Helen's words.
"I don't know how you pulled it off, but you wouldn't be the first Dufour to lean on her skills to vanquish an opponent."
With a deft movement, she unfolds the document with one hand before placing it flat on the counter before me. Under the timid and shifting lights, the text is barely legible. It seems to be a thorough list of assets, not unlike the one I had to sign when taking over the Aquilo Cafe. Except, instead of my name typed at the bottom of the page, it's that of Ophelia, and the business in question is listed as Pearls of Wisdom.
"What's this?" "Properties listed by your nemesis as collateral should her business go under."
Helen folds the paper back up, making it vanish into her coat again.
"And I've been asked to mediate a conflict with her landlord and one of her suppliers. Business is booming at Pearls of Wisdom, yet somehow creditors are coming out of the woodwork to take a bite out of it."
A shiver runs down my spine, and I cast a quick glance at Annabelle. She and Eric are gyrating wildly in the middle of the dining room, glasses in hand, laughing like hyenas under a full moon. There she is, proud little aspiring witch, unaware of how we eat our own.
"I didn't bake her a bankruptcy pie, if that's the accusation,"
I finally answer. Helen stands, draping her coat over her arm. I wish I could see better than the dim, flashing lights will allow. Not that I expect I could read her inscrutable features, but it would be reassuring to at least try. Instead, I have to imagine the disapproving look that lurks under multicolored shadows. It's easy to think that, now her message delivered, Helen Edna is on her way out, leaving me to ponder over my actions. Does she hope guilt will find me and I'll confess to how I dealt with Ophelia? Or does she already know and expects me to undo what I've done? She runs her fingertips over the counter. A single slab of wood, rough cut from the side of a fallen tree. It was offered by Michael when the Aquilo got renovated the summer I first came to town. If I close my eyes, I can still see the cafe as it was the night after the Inquisition tried their hand at demon slaying. Orlean and Alessandria brought down holy havoc upon my dining room, leaving it in tatters. The demon none the worse for wear. But they aren't demon hunters. Their business is taking down witches, and they've lingered in Aquilo for years waiting for prey. Threats have made it clear what awaits those of us who dabble in the fantastic.
"You can't uncook an egg,"
I explain, putting my own hand over the polished wood. Helen doesn't answer quite yet, taking the time to first unfold and put on her beige coat. Somehow the thick wool has suffered no fold or crease from being kept on her lap, looking impeccable once over her shoulders.
"Your business is as incomprehensible to me as mine is to you," she says. "But here's the thing about notaries in the province of Quebec. We're often used as the last line of arbitration and conflict resolution before lawyers and courts are involved. I'm no stranger to arbitration between warring parties, and there's a very good reason for that, Miriam. No matter the disagreement, everyone that comes to me has other, more powerful enemies in common. Whether it's the legal system or simply the hefty fees involved in litigation, it's often better to find common grounds than go to war."
After what that woman has done, and attempted to do to me,
A little bankruptcy will serve as a good lesson, and nothing Helen says will dissuade me from that. Taking my silence as an answer, Helen Edna, notary public, sighs and walks past me on her way to the door. However, before she puts her hand on the handle to open it, she turns one last time. You know, Miriam, I've seen doors, and you for that matter, before miracles far greater than uncooking an egg. I stand, quietly listening to the fading notes of a dance song I couldn't name, expecting my friend to leave, disappointed in me. But Helen has one last surprise in store before her departure, something I suspect she only pulls out as a last resort and when all else fails. Opening the door, she gives me a soft, sympathetic smile. The chimes bid Helen farewell, just as another song starts to play on the dining room speakers. Alone, Jordan cheers his approval for the slow, dirge-like music, but he's left alone on the dance floor while others congregate to the counter, seeking libations and food. Meanwhile, I watch as Helen makes her way in front of the Aquilow's front window and stop. Annoyed, she pulls her phone from her purse, just as I feel mine vibrating. Made curious by the coincidence, I reach into my apron and pull out the offending device. No need to punch in a code or unlock the screen. The notification is short and dramatic, sobering me with the violence of a bucket full of ice. Through the window, my eyes meet those of Helen, lit by the glow of her own message. Without a word, without thinking, I rush out of the Aquilo.
Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.